Yeah, there was a certain loss, there was a certain adriftness within my own heart and life and where I was going and what I was doing.
Pierce Brosnan is the actor who played James Bond in several famous movies, but what most people don't know is that his real life has been filled with more tragedy than any movie script could ever contain. And right now, at 71 years old, he's facing something that might be his hardest battle yet. His story starts in a small Irish town called Drogheda on May 16, 1953, where he was born into poverty with almost nothing, and the first heartbreak of his life came when he was just a baby. His father, Thomas, walked out and never came back, leaving Pierce to grow up without ever knowing what his dad looked like or sounded like. When Pierce was only 4 years old, his mother May had to make an impossible choice that would haunt both of them for years. She had to leave him behind and move to London to find work as a nurse, promising she'd come back soon. But that soon turned into 7 long years, where little Pierce was passed around between his grandparents and his aunt and uncle, never feeling like he truly belonged anywhere. During those 7 years, Pierce learned to stay quiet, to not cause trouble, and to always feel like he was just a temporary guest in other people's homes, which created deep wounds in his heart that would affect him for the rest of his life. When his mother finally returned in 1964 with a new husband named William Carmichael, Pierce was 11 years old and had to learn how to trust adults again, though William turned out to be a kind man who taught him how to fish and tried his best to be a good stepfather. That same year, something magical happened that would change Pierce's life forever. William took him to see the James Bond movie Goldfinger, and as Pierce watched Sean Connery on the big screen being confident and powerful, he thought to himself, "That's the man I want to be," planting a dream in his heart that wouldn't come true for over 30 years. As a teenager, Pierce thought he wanted to be a painter, so he went to art school in London, eating nothing but toast and tea because he was so poor. But one day in 1971, he wandered into a theater workshop and saw a fire eater practicing. And on a crazy impulse, he asked if he could try it, which led to him being invited to join an acting school called the Drama Centre London. The acting school was incredibly difficult, and more than half the students quit. But Pierce stayed because he had learned as a child how to endure hard times, working odd jobs to pay his bills while studying Shakespeare, and even learning circus skills and mime. His first real break came in 1982 when he auditioned for a small background role in a TV detective show called Remington Steele. But instead, they offered him the lead role even though he was unknown in America, and the character was supposed to be a smooth American charmer, not an Irish actor with a different style. Remington Steele became a huge hit with over 15 million people watching every week, and suddenly Pierce Brosnan was famous. But this fame came with an unexpected problem. Everyone started saying he should be the next James Bond, which sounds great, but actually made his life complicated for years. In 1983, the James Bond producers noticed him and seriously considered giving him the role, but the timing was wrong because Roger Moore decided to do one more Bond film, so Pierce missed his chance. 3 years later, in 1986, it looked like Pierce would finally get to play Bond because Remington Steele had been canceled, freeing him up, but then at the last minute, the TV network brought the show back for another season, and Pierce was stuck in his contract, so he had to watch his friend Timothy Dalton gets the Bond role instead. For the next 8 years, Pierce kept working in movies and even did Diet Coke commercials where he wore a tuxedo as a joke about the Bond role he kept missing. And people started calling this period the Lost Bond years because everyone thought he was perfect for the part, but the timing kept being wrong. Finally, in 1994, the call came again, and this time nothing got in the way. Pierce was going to be James Bond in a movie called GoldenEye, which was a huge risk because the Bond movies hadn't been doing well, and if this one failed, the whole series might end forever. Pierce threw himself into the role with incredible dedication, doing most of his own stunts, including a terrifying 220-meter bungee jump off a dam that was so dangerous the insurance company didn't want to cover it. And when GoldenEye came out in 1995, it made $353 million worldwide and saved the entire James Bond franchise. He went on to make 3 more Bond movies that together made over $1.2 billion, and for millions of fans around the world, Pierce Brosnan became the definitive James Bond, the one they loved most. But in 2004, at the height of his success, everything came crashing down in the cruelest way possible. While he was filming in the Bahamas, he got a phone call that lasted only 47 seconds where someone simply said, "You were a great James Bond. Thank you very much. Goodbye," and hung up. And just like that, his time as Bond was over with no warning and no real explanation. What made it even worse was finding out later that the producers had been secretly auditioning younger actors for 2 years, while still letting Pierce think he had a future in the role, which felt like a terrible betrayal after everything he'd done for the franchise. The consequences were brutal. 3 major movie deals disappeared overnight. His salary offers dropped from $12 million to just $3 million per film. He had to fire 12 people from his staff, and Hollywood started saying he was too Bond to play other roles, effectively killing his career. But the professional heartbreak was nothing compared to the personal tragedies Pierce had been dealing with behind the scenes. And this is where his story becomes almost unbearably sad. Back in the late 1970s, before he was famous, Pierce had met and fallen in love with an actress named Cassandra Harris, who already had 2 children from a previous marriage named Charlotte and Christopher, and Pierce didn't hesitate to become their father, loving them as his own and later legally adopting them. In 1983, Pierce and Cassandra had a son together named Sean, and for a while, Pierce thought he had finally found the stable, loving family he had always dreamed of as a lonely child being passed between relatives. But in 1987, while Pierce was working overseas, Cassandra started feeling tired and having pain that wouldn't go away, and when she went to the doctor in London, they discovered she had ovarian cancer that was already in an advanced stage. And in that moment, Pierce's perfect life shattered into pieces. For 4 terrible years, from 1987 to 1991, Pierce watched the woman he loved more than anything slowly die, going through surgery after surgery and brutal chemotherapy treatments that took her hair and her strength, but never her dignity or courage. Their young son, Sean, who was just a little boy, would sometimes dress up as a pretend doctor with toy medical equipment and try to treat his mother, which was both sweet and absolutely heartbreaking because everyone knew his make-believe medicine couldn't save her. On December 28, 1991, just 1 day after their 11th wedding anniversary, Cassandra died at age 43 with Pierce holding her hand, and he became a widower at 38 years old, left to raise 3 children while dealing with grief so deep he could barely function. Pierce thought that losing Cassandra was the worst pain he would ever experience, that nothing could ever hurt that much again, but life had an even crueler twist waiting for him. And what happened next shows just how unfair and devastating fate can be. Charlotte, the daughter he had adopted and loved as his own, started showing symptoms of the exact same disease that had killed her mother, ovarian cancer, which can run in families through genetics, meaning Charlotte had inherited the deadly illness. She was only 40 years old when she was diagnosed, and Pierce felt like he was being dragged back into a nightmare he thought had ended. Forced to relive the same horror, but this time watching his daughter, instead of his wife, slowly die. For 3 years, from 2010 to 2013, Charlotte fought the cancer with the same courage her mother had shown, going through surgeries and chemotherapy while trying to stay strong for her own 2 children, Isabella, who was 15, and Lucas, who was 8. In June 2013, knowing she was dying and wanting to give her children one last beautiful memory, Charlotte put on a white wedding dress and married her longtime partner, Alex, in a ceremony that was both joyful and heartbreaking because everyone knew what was coming. 2 weeks after her wedding, on June 28, 2013, Charlotte died at age 41, and the terrible symmetry of it all was almost too much to bear. Charlotte died at 41, just like Cassandra died at 43. Lucas was 8 when his mother died, just like Sean had been 8. And Isabella was 15, just like Charlotte had been 15 when her mother got sick. Pierce stood at another funeral, burying another person he loved, and this time it was his child, which is something no parent should ever have to do. At a cancer fundraiser in 2014, Pierce spoke publicly about his pain, saying, "I held the generous, strong, beautiful hand of my first wife, Cassie, as ovarian cancer took her life much too soon. And just last year, I held the hand of my funny, wonderful daughter, Charlotte, before she too died from this wretched inherited disease." And when he said those words, everyone in the room understood that some pain is so deep that no amount of time can heal it. Through all of this tragedy, there was one person who kept Pierce from completely falling apart, a woman named Keely Shaye Smith, who he met at a beach party in Mexico in 1994, just months before he became James Bond. Keely was a journalist and environmental activist, and unlike the women who were interested in Pierce because he was becoming famous, she saw the real man underneath, the one still grieving for his dead wife, and she didn't try to make him forget his pain, but simply stayed with him through it. They got married in 2001 in an 800-year-old abbey in Ireland, and together they had 2 sons, Dylan and Paris, giving Pierce a chance to be a father again and to experience family joy despite all the loss he had suffered. Keely became Pierce's anchor, holding him together when Charlotte got sick and standing by him when he lost the Bond role. And over the years, when tabloids cruelly criticized her appearance and weight, Pierce fiercely defended her, saying, "I love every curve of her body. She is the most beautiful woman in my eyes," showing the loyalty and love that defined his character. But there was one more heartbreak Pierce had to face, and this one was different because it wasn't about death but about watching someone he loved slowly destroy themselves while being powerless to stop it. Christopher, the son Pierce had adopted and raised as his own, struggled with addiction and legal problems for years, and despite Pierce's best efforts to help him through rehab and support, Christopher couldn't break free from his demons. Eventually, Pierce had to make the heartbreaking decision to step back and love Christopher from a distance, which is a different kind of grief. Not the grief of death, but the grief of watching someone slowly slip away while they're still alive. Today, at 72 years old, Pierce Brosnan lives quietly with Keely in homes in Malibu and Hawaii, spending his time painting, which he started doing during Cassandra's illness as therapy, supporting environmental causes, raising money for cancer research, and being a grandfather to Charlotte's children, Isabella and Lucas. He still acts occasionally when roles interest him, but his focus now is on family, art, and using his fame to support causes that matter to him, especially cancer research and environmental protection. Financially secure with a net worth in the tens of millions, including selling his Malibu estate for $100 million in 2020. Pierce doesn't need to work for money anymore, and instead he chooses projects that have meaning or that allow him to spend time with his family. His body shows the natural effects of age, silver hair, a slower walk. But he stays active through swimming, walking on the beach, and yoga, not to look young but to stay healthy enough to enjoy his grandchildren and continue his work. The question that haunts many people who know Pierce's story is simply, how has he survived all this pain without breaking completely? The answer seems to be in his own words. Life has to go on, and if it does, you better find something worth living for. For Pierce, that something is his family with Keely and their sons, his grandchildren who carry Charlotte's memory forward, his art that allows him to express emotions too deep for words, and his charitable work that tries to prevent other families from experiencing the same tragedies he has endured. What makes Pierce Brosnan's story so powerful is not just the amount of tragedy he's faced, but the way he's faced it, with dignity, grace, and in refusal to let bitterness destroy him. He could have become angry at the world, could have given up after losing Cassandra, could have retreated from life after losing Charlotte, but instead he chose to keep loving, keep creating, and keep fighting for causes bigger than himself. The man who once played a fictional hero on screen has become a real-life hero by showing that true strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up after life knocks you down again and again, and still finding reasons to love, to hope, and to believe that your life can have meaning even after unspeakable loss.